Sit back, relax, and welcome to Reading Hours. Today's book is The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. Please let us know in the comments from where you are watching, or if there is a book you want us to summarize in future. Published in 1776, an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations, commonly known simply as The Wealth of Nations, is a monumental work by the Scottish economist and moral philosopher Adam Smith. It is more than just a textbook or a treatise. It is a sweeping exploration of how economies grow, how individuals behave in markets, and how nations organize the exchange of goods, services, and labor. Written during the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, in a world transforming rapidly through technological innovation, colonial expansion, and political upheaval, Smith's work sought to explain the mechanisms behind national prosperity and individual enterprise. Smith was not an economist in the modern sense, but a moral philosopher. His inquiry into economics was rooted deeply in his understanding of human behavior, social structures, and ethics. What makes The Wealth of Nations revolutionary is not just its advocacy for free markets and limited government intervention, but its nuanced appreciation for the complex interplay between self-interest, societal benefit, labor, value, and capital. It's in this text that Smith famously introduces the idea of the invisible hand, the metaphor describing how individual pursuits of self-gain can, unintentionally, lead to beneficial outcomes for society at large. The book is vast, spread across 5 books or sections, covering topics such as the division of labor, the origins and uses of money, the role of the state, taxation, international trade, and the accumulation of capital. Its ideas have influenced centuries of economic thought, from classical economics to capitalism, and continue to shape modern policy and debate. But this influence hasn't come without controversy. Critics from both the political left and right have debated Smith's intentions. Was he the original champion of unregulated markets? Or was he a complex thinker who, while recognizing the power of markets, also saw the importance of justice, education, and government regulation to keep self-interest in check? Scholars still argue over the degree to which Smith supported laissez-faire policies versus more socially responsible governance. This summary will guide you in 10 immersive parts through the heart of the wealth of nations. While the book is dense and deeply analytical, the goal here is to open up its ideas in an accessible, story-like format, where each concept flows like a narrative, rich with historical context, real-world examples, and Smith's own voice woven into the journey. In a modest pin factory tucked away in 18th century Britain, an idea was born that would revolutionize the understanding of economic progress. Adam Smith begins his inquiry not with abstract theories, but with a concrete example, the division of labor. In this small factory, where pins are manufactured, Smith observes that if 10 workers each undertake a specific task, rather than all trying to make complete pins individually, they can produce thousands of pins a day, instead of only a handful. This simple observation is the foundation of Smith's first and perhaps most famous economic principle, that the division of labor leads to significant improvements in productivity. It's not because each worker becomes more intelligent or skilled, but because they focus on a narrow task, becoming highly efficient. Time is saved, skills are honed, and tools are specialized, all contributing to an output that would be impossible if everyone attempted to do everything themselves. But Smith doesn't stop at the factory floor. He extends this insight into every corner of economic life. In agriculture, in trade, in crafts, wherever labor is divided, productivity soars. And from this productivity, wealth is born. Yet Smith is not romantic about this process. He acknowledges that as labor becomes more specialized, the worker may become intellectually diminished. A man who spends his entire life making just the head of a pin, Smith warns, may become as stupid and ignorant as it is possible for a human creature to become. Thus, even in this early celebration of specialization, there is a note of caution, a reminder that economic efficiency must be tempered with human dignity and education. To understand how this division of labor arises, Smith looks toward an intrinsic human trait, our propensity to truck, barter, and exchange. Unlike other animals that act based on command or instinct, humans negotiate. A dog doesn't exchange bones with another dog, Smith notes, but humans are born traders. This ability to communicate needs and fulfill them through mutual exchange is what drives the development of markets and, by extension, the growth of nations. This brings Smith to a key point. Markets do not require central coordination. They arise naturally from the countless interactions of individuals seeking to satisfy their own wants. It is here that we begin to see the threads of what would later be called the invisible hand. Each person, in pursuing his or her own interest, ends up promoting the interests of society more effectively than if they had tried to do so directly. Smith moves on to explore how value is created and measured. He distinguishes between value in use and value in exchange. Water, for example, is immensely useful, but has little exchange value, while diamonds, far less useful, are extremely valuable in trade. What explains this paradox? For Smith, it is labor that ultimately determines the value of a good. The more labor required to produce something, the more valuable it becomes in the marketplace. But here, too, Smith's thinking is complex. He acknowledges that in modern society, value is not determined solely by labor, especially once capital enters the equation. When a capitalist invests in machinery or tools, the return on that capital also becomes part of the price of a product. Thus, value emerges not just from the worker's hands, but also from the tools he uses, the investments behind those tools, and the coordination of both. The accumulation of capital, savings turned into investment, is critical for a nation's growth. Smith sees this process as a virtuous cycle. When individuals save and invest rather than consume all their income, capital is formed. That capital hires more labor, which produces more goods, which leads to more wealth. But again, Smith tempers his enthusiasm with a warning. Capital must be directed toward productive uses. When it is squandered on luxury or speculation, it does not contribute to national wealth. Smith's early chapters build like the opening movements of a grand symphony. Each concept, division of labor, human exchange, value, capital, adds a new instrument to the orchestra. They are not just economic ideas, they are human stories. The butcher, the brewer, and the baker do not feed us out of kindness, but from their regard to their own self-interest. Yet in acting for themselves, they weave together a fabric of mutual dependence. He continues to explore how trade allows each nation to specialize just as workers do. countries that produce what they are most efficient at, and trade for what others are better at producing, can all benefit. This principle of comparative advantage, though not named as such until later economists expanded on it, is seated here in Smith's prose. Trade is not a zero-sum game, but a path to mutual enrichment. As we move through the pages of The Wealth of Nations, we realize we are not merely reading an economic manual. We are walking through a profound exploration of human behavior, of history, of political structure, and of the moral dimensions of prosperity. Smith's genius lies not just in his clarity, but in his humanity. He sees economies not as machines, but as living organisms made of people, habits, choices, and consequences. And so the journey begins. With labor divided and value taking shape, we look ahead to the next great force in Smith's economic cosmos: the role of money, its origin, its utility, and its evolution as a facilitator of exchange. In the world Adam Smith envisioned, even the simplest transaction, a farmer trading grain for iron, sets the stage for something much larger: the growth of nations, the creation of markets, and the birth of modern capitalism. The pulse of a thriving economy, according to Adam Smith, begins not in grand palaces or bustling marketplaces, but in the small, often overlooked interactions of ordinary workers, in the modest workshops and crowded factories where simple tasks are performed day after day. It is here that Smith identified a force of astonishing power: the division of labor. What at first seems like a straightforward method of organizing work soon reveals itself, under Smith's examination, to be a transformative engine of wealth and progress. Smith begins his exploration of this principle by leading the reader into a humble pin factory, a world away from the political debates and royal courts of his time. Yet, within this seemingly mundane setting, Smith unveils a miracle of human ingenuity. In a factory where labor is divided into distinct operations, each worker becomes a specialist in a single task. One draws out the wire, another straightens it, a third cuts it, while others sharpen, polish, and affix the head of the pin. Individually, a worker performing every step of the process might struggle to complete even a few pins in a day. But when labor is divided and each task is mastered through repetition and focus, the results are staggering. A mere 10 workers can produce thousands of pins daily. This observation is not limited to pin making. Smith saw the division of labor as a universal principle governing all industries and sectors of society. From agriculture to manufacturing, from commerce to intellectual pursuits, specialization magnifies human potential. It transforms isolated effort into collective achievement. But why does this phenomenon create such explosive growth in productivity? Smith identified 3 key reasons. First, the division of labor enhances skill. When a worker performs a single task repeatedly, their dexterity and efficiency improve dramatically. What once required careful attention becomes effortless and instinctive. Repetition breeds mastery. Second, it saves time. A worker focused solely on one operation avoids the delays inherent in shifting between different tools, materials, or mental frameworks. The constant switching from one task to another, which seems minor in the moment, adds up to significant inefficiencies over time. Third, and perhaps most revolutionary, the division of labor spurs innovation. When workers engage intimately with a specific task, they are more likely to devise improvements, create new tools, or develop novel methods to further streamline their work. The mechanical inventions that powered the Industrial Revolution often sprang from such humble beginnings, from the observations and insights of workers immersed in their specialized duties. Yet, Smith was keenly aware that the benefits of this principle were not automatic or without limits. The extent of the division of labor, he argued, is constrained by the size of the market. In a small village, a single craftsman might need to serve many roles: butcher, baker, and blacksmith, simply because there are too few customers to sustain specialists in each trade. But in large, densely populated markets, specialization flourishes. A single worker might spend an entire career making nothing but shoelaces or buttons because the demand is vast enough to sustain such narrow focus. This insight links the division of labor not only to productivity, but to the structure of human society itself. Cities, trade networks, and expanding markets enable individuals to focus more narrowly, refine their skills, and contribute to an economy far beyond their immediate surroundings. It is here that Smith's analysis takes on a profound human dimension. Economic progress is tied to human interaction, cooperation, and exchange. No man is an island. Wealth grows from interconnectedness. However, the division of labor also carries a darker implication, one that Smith did not shy away from. While specialization enhances efficiency, it can also narrow the mind. A worker performing a single monotonous task day after day might lose the intellectual stimulation that comes from varied work. The same system that creates vast wealth may, if unchecked, degrade the individual's creativity and vitality. It is a tension that would later preoccupy economists, sociologists, and political theorists alike. Smith's narrative continues by exploring how the division of labor gives rise to exchange, the fundamental act of trade that binds human societies together. He famously observed that it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. In other words, people provide goods and services not out of charity, but because they seek something in return, a mutually beneficial exchange. This idea of self-interest is not cold-hearted greed in Smith's vision. Rather, it is a recognition of how human societies function most effectively when individuals pursue their needs and desires within a framework of voluntary exchange and mutual respect. Each person, specializing in what they do best, trades their surplus for the products and services they require. This web of transactions forms the lifeblood of an economy. As Smith delves deeper into these ideas, he challenges the prevailing economic doctrines of his day. The mercantilist view, which prioritized the hoarding of gold and silver as measures of wealth, is dismissed as misguided. Real wealth, Smith argues, lies not in stockpiles of precious metals, but in the abundance of goods and services produced by a nation's labor. Money is merely a tool of exchange, a convenience, but it is human industry, ingenuity, and cooperation that create true prosperity. In this vision, a nation's wealth is not confined to its treasury, but is embodied in its people, in their skills, their labor, and their capacity to exchange and specialize. This understanding would reshape not only economic theory, but also political thought, influencing revolutions, reforms, and the development of modern capitalism. Adam Smith's reflections on the division of labor reveal an enduring truth about the human condition. Our greatest achievements arise not from isolated effort, but from the intricate tapestry of cooperation, specialization, and exchange that binds us together. It is a vision of society as a living organism, one in which every part, no matter how humble, plays a vital role in the health and wealth of the whole. As Adam Smith delves deeper into the mechanics of human society, he draws attention to one of the most natural behaviors that arise from the division of labor, the act of exchange. When men devote themselves to particular trades, becoming experts in narrow fields, they inevitably depend on others to meet their remaining needs. The very success of specialization creates a world where no one can live entirely self-sufficient. The farmer needs tools he cannot forge. The shoemaker requires food he does not grow. The weaver must clothe not only himself, but those who provide him with raw materials. This interconnectedness is not driven by generosity or charity. Smith observes with piercing clarity, but by self-interest guided by reason. Human beings, unlike animals, rarely survive through strength or instinct alone. What sets them apart is their ability to persuade, to negotiate, to offer what they have in exchange for what they lack. This process of bargaining, this quiet, universal language of trade, becomes the foundation upon which all commerce is built. Smith famously reminds his readers that we do not receive our dinner from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker, but from their regard to their own interest. Each individual trades not out of love for their fellow man, but because it serves their own survival and prosperity. And yet, in this seemingly selfish pursuit of personal gain, a miraculous cooperation emerges, one that binds entire societies together in an intricate web of mutual benefit. This system of exchange does not require elaborate planning or a central authority dictating who must trade with whom. It arises naturally, spontaneously, wherever people gather and recognize the value of what each can offer. The market, in its purest form, is not an invention of kings or parliaments, but an organic product of human interaction, governed by the simple rules of supply, demand, and reciprocity. But even in its simplicity, the act of exchange necessitates a common measure of value. Without it, trade would be clumsy and limited to direct barter, a system where one good is traded only for another of perceived equal worth. Yet what happens when a man wishes to trade his wheat for a tool, but the blacksmith has no need for grain? How do societies overcome this obstacle? The answer, Smith explains, lies in the emergence of money, the great facilitator of trade. In primitive societies, people naturally gravitate towards certain goods that hold universal appeal and are widely accepted in exchange: cattle, salt, precious stones, or metals. Over time, metals such as gold and silver gained prominence because of their durability, divisibility, and inherent value. Money, therefore, is not merely a human invention, but the natural evolution of trade itself. It solves the problem of the double coincidence of wants, allowing people to sell their goods not just to those who need them, but to anyone willing to pay. Money becomes a store of value, a medium of exchange, and a standard of deferred payment. It allows labor, goods, and services to move freely through society without the clumsy limitations of barter. In doing so, it unleashes the full potential of the division of labor, permitting specialization to deepen and economies to grow more complex. Yet Smith is careful to point out that the value of money itself is not fixed. Gold and silver have value not merely because of their beauty or rarity, but because people agree to accept them in exchange for useful goods. If the supply of money grows faster than the goods available for purchase, its value falls, prices rise, purchasing power declines. Conversely, if money becomes scarce, prices fall and trade may slow. Money, then, is a reflection of the real wealth of a nation, its labor, its productivity, its capacity to create goods and services, not the wealth itself. Beyond the practical mechanics of trade and money, Smith subtly explores the moral and social implications of exchange. In a world where trade flourishes, people are drawn together not only by need, but by trust, reputation, and repeated interaction. Markets reward honesty, reliability, and skill. For these qualities bring customers back and build long-term prosperity. In contrast, fraud and dishonesty poison the very foundation of commerce, breaking down the essential trust that lubricates every transaction. As the scope of trade expands, from villages to towns, from towns to distant nations, commerce becomes a bridge between cultures and peoples. Goods travel across seas and continents. Ideas flow alongside them. The division of labor, which began humbly in the small workshops of local craftsmen, now spans oceans, linking distant strangers in a silent, cooperative dance of mutual interest. Smith envisions a world where the free exchange of goods does not merely enrich individuals, but serves as a force for peace and progress. Trade encourages people to see beyond narrow tribal or national loyalties. It fosters interdependence. A merchant in one country has little desire to wage war against a customer in another. Commerce binds humanity together in ways that force or conquest never could. Still, Smith remains grounded in reality. He acknowledges that markets are not perfect. They are vulnerable to manipulation, monopolies, and the selfish designs of men in power. He warns against those who would distort trade through special privileges, tariffs, or government favoritism. True prosperity, he argues, arises not from artificial restraints, but from the natural liberty of individuals to exchange freely, guided by their own needs and talents. Through this careful, layered examination of exchange and money, Smith illuminates not only the machinery of commerce, but the human heart at its center. A heart driven by self-interest, yet capable of extraordinary cooperation. In this vision of free trade, money is not merely metal or paper. It is trust made tangible, labor made portable, human connection made enduring. And it is this quiet miracle, the daily, unseen acts of exchange, that propels nations toward wealth, progress, and civilization. As Smith continues his exploration of economic principles, he now turns his attention to the role of money in facilitating trade. In the world of exchange, the limitations of barter become increasingly evident. In simple barter systems, one person trades a good they have for a good they need. But this process has significant drawbacks. It requires a double coincidence of wants. Both parties must possess something the other desires at the same time. This inherent limitation makes barter inefficient for expanding economies. The process becomes cumbersome when individuals' needs or wants are not perfectly aligned. Money, in this sense, is not a mere invention. It is a natural progression in the development of trade. As societies evolve, the need for something more flexible and universally accepted becomes undeniable. In early human economies, people began to exchange goods that were not only useful in themselves, but also widely accepted by others. This shift gave birth to the concept of money. In ancient societies, various items were used as primitive forms of money, ranging from cattle and shells to precious metals like gold and silver. These goods were universally desirable because they were portable, durable, and had intrinsic value. Over time, precious metals, especially gold and silver, became the dominant form of money. Their appeal stemmed from the fact that they were scarce, easily divided into smaller units, and had a long shelf life. Gold and silver were valuable, not only because people agreed to assign value to them, but also because their intrinsic properties, their durability, beauty, and scarcity, gave them value even in the absence of state-backed authority. Smith emphasizes that money facilitates trade and exchange in a way that barter never could. With money, the process of exchange becomes smoother, more efficient, and less dependent on the alignment of individual desires. A person no longer needs to search for someone who wants exactly what they have to offer. Instead, they can sell their goods for money and then use that money to buy what they need from others. The key to this transformation is the division of labor. As labor becomes more specialized, people no longer engage in the wide array of activities necessary for self-sufficiency. A blacksmith, for example, no longer grows his own food or makes his own clothes. Instead, he focuses on crafting metal goods, relying on others to supply him with food, clothing, and other necessities. This specialization allows individuals to hone their skills and produce more efficiently, leading to greater overall productivity. However, as people become more dependent on others for goods and services, they must find a way to exchange their specialized products. Money provides the perfect solution. It becomes the universal medium of exchange, enabling individuals to trade their specialized goods for the broader array of items they need. Smith's insight here is clear. Money is the grease that keeps the wheels of specialization turning, allowing for greater efficiency and economic growth. Money also introduces a degree of stability and predictability to the economic system. When people engage in trade using money, the value of that money becomes central to the functioning of the market. The price of goods and services is expressed in monetary terms, which allows for the comparison of different goods and the allocation of resources. Prices act as signals in the economy, reflecting the relative scarcity or abundance of goods and guiding producers in their decisions about what to make and how much to charge. This system allows for the efficient allocation of resources without the need for central planning or government interference. Instead of relying on a ruler or a central authority to determine the distribution of goods, the market operates through the decentralized decisions of countless individuals. Each person, acting in their own self-interest, contributes to the overall flow of resources. In this way, the market operates like an invisible hand, guiding the economy toward an efficient allocation of goods and services. The role of money extends beyond merely facilitating transactions. It also acts as a store of value. When people save money, they can store their wealth and defer consumption to the future. This ability to save and accumulate wealth is crucial for investment and the growth of capital. Without money, saving would be much more difficult, as individuals would need to find a way to store and safeguard their wealth in tangible forms. With money, however, wealth can be stored in an easily accessible and liquid form, which allows for greater flexibility in managing resources. Another important function of money is its role in promoting trade beyond local markets. As money becomes widely accepted, it allows for the exchange of goods across regions and even nations. Smith recognized that trade between nations, or international commerce, could drive prosperity and encourage peaceful relations between countries. Trade allows nations to access goods they cannot produce efficiently on their own, and in turn, they can offer goods to other nations in exchange. This international trade is mutually beneficial, as each nation can focus on producing what it does best and trade for the rest. The accumulation of wealth through trade benefits individuals within each nation, promoting overall economic growth. Smith believed that the more open and free trade became, the more prosperity would be shared across the globe. This principle of free trade was a cornerstone of his economic thought, and it would influence later thinkers and policymakers. However, despite the benefits of money and trade, Smith was not blind to the potential dangers of economic systems. He cautioned that, just as with any tool, money could be misused. The value of money depends on the relationship between the quantity of money in circulation and the amount of goods and services available. If too much money is introduced into the system without a corresponding increase in goods, inflation could occur, causing the purchasing power of money to decline. This, in turn, could disrupt markets and undermine the stability of the economy. In addition, Smith warned against monopolies and the concentration of economic power. When individuals or groups control too much of the market, they can manipulate prices and restrict competition, undermining the benefits of trade. To ensure that markets remain competitive and efficient, Smith argued that governments should prevent monopolies and protect the freedom of individuals to engage in trade. Through the lens of money, Adam Smith begins to tie together the earlier concepts of division of labor and exchange. Money serves as a powerful enabler of economic growth, allowing specialization to reach its full potential. As people specialize in their work, they become more productive, and the economy as a whole becomes wealthier. Money facilitates this specialization, providing a mechanism for exchanging goods and services across society and between nations. In the end, Smith's exploration of money highlights its importance not just as a tool of trade, but as the backbone of a thriving, interconnected economy. It is through money that individuals, businesses, and nations can engage in complex, dynamic exchanges that fuel the growth and prosperity of society. The efficiency, stability, and potential for wealth creation that money enables are central to the flourishing of civilizations. Adam Smith's exploration of economic life takes a crucial turn as he shifts focus from the role of money to the very nature of wealth itself. What is wealth? How does a nation grow wealthy? And what role does the labor of its people play in the accumulation of wealth? For Smith, wealth is not merely gold and silver, nor the land and resources a nation possesses. Instead, he argues that wealth lies in the productive capacity of a society, the ability to produce goods and services efficiently through the labor of its people. A nation's wealth, therefore, is rooted in the labor that powers its economy, the skills of its workers, and the manner in which resources are allocated across society. At the heart of this process is the division of labor. The division of labor, according to Smith, is the key to understanding how wealth is created and distributed within a nation. Rather than every individual performing all tasks necessary for their survival, growing their own food, building their own shelter, and making their own clothes, individuals specialize in one or a few tasks. This specialization allows people to develop expertise, improve efficiency, and increase output. For example, a worker who spends all his time making shoes will become highly skilled at making shoes and will produce more shoes in less time than a worker who only makes shoes part-time while also farming his own food. This concept of specialization is not just about becoming more proficient in a single task. It also transforms the way society as a whole functions. With each worker focusing on a specific task, they can produce much more than they could on their own. The productivity of labor is therefore enhanced, leading to a greater total output of goods and services. Through the division of labor, each person contributes to a collective enterprise that leads to a greater quantity and variety of products available in the marketplace. Smith argues that the division of labor can be seen in many facets of society, but it reaches its highest form in the marketplace. As labor becomes more specialized, the need for exchange between individuals becomes paramount. A farmer growing wheat does not need to also know how to make tools, bake bread, or sew clothes. Instead, he focuses on cultivating his land and producing wheat. Other workers, each skilled in different areas of production, can then exchange their goods, allowing for a more complex and efficient society. This system is not limited to one individual's immediate needs, but allows people to trade across regions and even nations, facilitating the flow of goods and services on a much larger scale. Smith also delves into the notion of the invisible hand, which is one of the most enduring concepts in his work. The idea is that, in a market driven by self-interest, individuals pursuing their own goals, whether seeking profit, better living conditions, or fulfilling personal needs, unintentionally contribute to the common good. When individuals engage in trade, they do so because they seek to improve their own welfare. Yet in doing so, they help to create a more prosperous society for everyone. A baker who wants to make a profit will bake bread not only for his own benefit, but because others need bread, and they are willing to pay for it. In this way, the baker's self-interest drives him to contribute to the overall wealth of society. Smith's belief in the power of self-interest and the invisible hand has profound implications for his views on government intervention. In his ideal system, government interference should be minimal. He argues that the market, when left to operate freely, will regulate itself and distribute resources efficiently. Governments, therefore, should focus on protecting the nation's borders, maintaining public infrastructure, and ensuring justice through the legal system. Beyond these essential functions, Smith argues, government should not interfere with the workings of the economy. However, Smith is not blind to the complexities of the market system. He acknowledges that markets can sometimes fail, especially when monopolies or corrupt practices emerge. In such cases, the government has a role to play in ensuring that competition remains fair, markets remain open, and the public interest is not undermined by the accumulation of too much power in the hands of a few. An important aspect of Smith's theory is his view on the accumulation of capital. Capital, for Smith, refers to the wealth used to produce more wealth. It can take the form of physical goods, such as machinery, tools, or land, or it can be financial capital, such as savings or investments. The accumulation of capital is essential for economic growth, as it enables increased production and greater productivity. Capital is invested in labor and resources, creating wealth not just for the individual investors, but for society at large. This accumulation, however, is not a process without consequences. Smith acknowledges that the uneven distribution of wealth is an inherent part of capitalism. While some people will accumulate great wealth, others may be left behind. This imbalance can lead to economic inequality, which Smith recognized as a potential source of social unrest. He was aware that without safeguards in place, such as systems of education, welfare, and fair competition, the wealth generated by capitalism could disproportionately benefit the already wealthy and powerful, while others would struggle to achieve prosperity. Yet despite these potential flaws, Smith remains optimistic about the long-term benefits of a market-driven economy. His faith in human ingenuity and the natural order of the market is clear. He believed that capitalism, when left to operate freely and without excessive interference, was capable of producing wealth and prosperity for all. The invisible hand, he argued, would guide resources to where they were most needed, ensuring that the economy grew and evolved in ways that benefited society as a whole. In his discussion of wealth and labor, Smith also touches on the nature of wages. Wages, he asserts, are determined by the supply and demand for labor. Workers whose skills are in high demand can command higher wages, while those in less demanded fields must accept lower pay. This dynamic incentivizes individuals to improve their skills and adapt to the demands of the market, thereby enhancing the overall productivity of society. Furthermore, as more people are drawn into specialized forms of work, the wage system helps to distribute wealth according to an individual's contribution to the economy. The division of labor, the power of the invisible hand, the role of self-interest, and the accumulation of capital are all intertwined in Smith's vision of how economies grow and societies prosper. By exploring these principles in depth, Smith laid the foundation for much of modern economics. His work provided not only a framework for understanding the mechanics of wealth generation, but also a philosophical justification for the free market system. While later thinkers would build upon and challenge his ideas, Smith's insights remain central to the discourse on economic theory to this day. Through his analysis of the division of labor and the nature of wealth, Smith created a blueprint for a market-driven society that values the contributions of individuals, promotes specialization, and encourages trade and exchange. Yet, while Smith celebrated the efficiency of markets, he also cautioned against the dangers of monopolies, inequality, and government inaction. His ideas continue to influence economic thought and policy, shaping the modern world in profound ways. Adam Smith's exploration of the intricacies of wealth and society continues as he examines the role of government in the economic system and how the forces of the market intersect with public policy. One of the central themes of The Wealth of Nations is the delicate balance between free market capitalism and government intervention. While Smith strongly advocates for the efficiencies of a market that operates without excessive interference, he also acknowledges certain circumstances where the government must intervene to ensure fairness, justice, and the maintenance of public order. This nuanced understanding of the government's role offers a foundation for future economic policy debates. The first major area in which Smith believes the government should intervene is in defense and national security. Smith argues that the protection of a nation's borders is an essential function of government. The state's responsibility to defend its people and secure its territory is foundational, as it ensures that commerce, trade, and industry can thrive without external threats. A stable environment, free from war or invasion, is critical to maintaining the wealth and prosperity that a nation has worked to achieve. Smith's ideas about defense are framed by his belief that a secure nation can create the conditions for its people to engage in productive labor and exchange, which ultimately increases national wealth. Another area where Smith emphasizes government involvement is in the maintenance of public infrastructure. Roads, bridges, ports, and other forms of infrastructure are indispensable to the smooth functioning of the economy. The construction and maintenance of these public works are not profitable endeavors for private individuals or companies. In many cases, infrastructure is so expensive and large-scale that private investments cannot efficiently manage its provision. Smith asserts that the government is best suited to fund and oversee such projects because it can distribute the benefits across the entire nation, rather than leaving their provision to individual entrepreneurs who may focus only on profitable regions. In addition to defense and infrastructure, Smith acknowledges the need for government regulation in the area of justice. A well-functioning legal system is vital for the protection of property rights and the enforcement of contracts. The rule of law is foundational to economic activity, as individuals and businesses need to feel confident that their property and agreements will be protected by the state. In his view, the government must ensure that people's rights are respected and that disputes are settled fairly and impartially. This legal protection creates a level playing field where people can engage in trade and commerce with the confidence that their rights will not be infringed upon. However, Smith was keenly aware that the government could also be a source of economic dysfunction. While he advocated for a limited role for the state, he was not blind to the potential abuses of power or the distorting effects of excessive regulation. A government that oversteps its bounds can introduce inefficiencies into the economy and hinder the very mechanisms of the market that lead to prosperity. For example, Smith was deeply critical of government policies that favored monopolies or restricted free competition. He argued that monopolies, whether state-sponsored or formed by private interests, were harmful because they prevented the efficient allocation of resources and hindered innovation. Monopolies disrupt the competitive forces that drive economic progress and ultimately lead to higher prices and fewer choices for consumers. Smith's criticism of monopolies leads to a broader point about the relationship between government and business. In a free market system, businesses are driven by the desire to maximize profits. However, when businesses gain too much influence over the political process, they may lobby for policies that benefit them at the expense of the public good. For example, a company that controls a key industry might seek government protection against competition, stifling innovation and raising prices. Smith believed that such crony capitalism could undermine the principles of a free market, where competition and innovation should reign. A government that allows business interests to distort market forces in this way undermines the efficiency of the entire economic system. While government intervention is necessary in certain circumstances, Smith was wary of excessive regulation, taxation, and state control over economic activities. He believed that when governments attempt to micromanage the economy, they risk stifling individual enterprise and diminishing the incentives for innovation. One of Smith's core principles is that economic agents should be allowed to pursue their self-interest freely, within the bounds of law and order. When individuals are free to pursue their economic goals, they contribute to the greater good, as their pursuit of profit drives the creation of goods and services that benefit society as a whole. Moreover, Smith discusses the consequences of taxation and the allocation of public resources. He argued that taxes should be fair and equitable, imposed in a manner that does not burden the productive capacities of individuals and businesses. Taxes, according to Smith, should be proportional to the ability of individuals to pay, based on their income or wealth. He believed that taxes should not be so high as to discourage production or investment. At the same time, he stressed that taxes are necessary to fund the essential functions of government, such as defense, justice, and public infrastructure. However, Smith was cautious about the potential abuse of the taxing power, fearing that excessive taxation could lead to economic stagnation and resentment among the people. In his analysis of the state's role in the economy, Smith also turns his attention to the issue of public education. He recognizes that an educated population is key to a prosperous society, as education enhances the productivity of labor and creates a more informed citizenry. While he does not advocate for universal education in the way that modern social welfare policies might, he emphasizes that the government has a role to play in promoting education, particularly in the areas of basic literacy and skills. An educated workforce, Smith argues, will be more productive, innovative, and better able to adapt to the evolving needs of the economy. In this context, Smith's views on education and the role of government in supporting the public good contrast with the purely laissez-faire approach that some later economists would adopt. Smith's recognition of the need for government intervention in areas such as defense, infrastructure, and education reflects a pragmatic understanding of the complexities of economic life. While he champions the efficiency of the market, he also acknowledges that certain social needs require collective action, and that government intervention can, in certain cases, enhance the workings of the market. Ultimately, Smith's work is not just about the mechanics of wealth creation, but about the broader principles of justice, fairness, and the role of the state in facilitating the conditions for prosperity. He was not an advocate for unchecked capitalism or a system that allowed a small number of individuals to monopolize wealth and power. Instead, he envisioned a society where individuals were free to pursue their self-interest, but within a framework that ensured the public good and minimized the potential for exploitation. Through his nuanced perspective on government's role, Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations continues to be a foundational work in understanding the complexities of modern economics. His insights into the balance between free markets and government intervention remain relevant in today's globalized world, where debates over taxation, regulation, and public services continue to shape economic policy. As Adam Smith continues to elaborate on the principles that govern the wealth of nations, he delves into the complex relationship between labor, production, and wealth generation. One of his most profound contributions in The Wealth of Nations is the concept of the division of labor, which, in his view, is a key factor in increasing productivity and fostering economic growth. This division of labor, or specialization, allows individuals and businesses to focus on a particular task, thereby honing their skills and producing goods and services more efficiently. By organizing work in this manner, economies can maximize output and make better use of resources. Smith uses the example of a pin factory to illustrate the effectiveness of the division of labor. He describes how a single worker, by focusing on a specific task, such as drawing out wire or shaping the heads of pins, can produce far more pins in a day than if that same worker attempted to perform all the tasks involved in pin production. The specialization of labor, Smith argues, leads to an exponential increase in productivity as workers become more skilled and efficient at their assigned tasks. This, in turn, drives down the cost of production, making goods more affordable for consumers and creating wealth for both producers and consumers alike. The division of labor also encourages innovation. By focusing on a specific task, workers and entrepreneurs are more likely to experiment with new tools, techniques, and methods that can further improve productivity. In this way, the market becomes a dynamic environment where innovation drives progress, and businesses that fail to innovate or adapt to new methods are gradually replaced by more efficient competitors. This continuous cycle of improvement is a hallmark of a thriving capitalist economy, where the forces of competition lead to greater efficiency and technological advancement. However, while Smith extols the virtues of the division of labor, he also recognizes its limitations and potential drawbacks. One concern he raises is the potential for workers to become monotonous or mentally stifled when performing the same task repeatedly. He acknowledges that specialization can lead to a reduction in the diversity of skills and a narrowing of the worker's experience. This, in turn, can make workers more vulnerable to changes in the economy, as they may lack the flexibility to transition into new roles or industries. Smith's critique of the division of labor highlights his understanding of the human side of economic systems, recognizing that economic policies and practices must also consider the well-being and development of individuals within the system. The division of labor also has important implications for the organization of markets. As specialization increases, so too does the interdependence between different sectors of the economy. The production of goods and services becomes a highly coordinated process, with various industries and sectors relying on each other to complete the production chain. For example, the manufacture of a car requires the cooperation of multiple industries: steel for the body, rubber for the tires, electronics for the dashboard, and so on. This interdependence creates a complex web of supply chains, each dependent on the smooth functioning of the others. Smith is also keenly aware of the role that markets play in facilitating this specialization. In a competitive market, goods and services are exchanged based on supply and demand, and producers are incentivized to meet the needs of consumers efficiently. The prices that emerge from these market transactions provide signals to producers, indicating which goods are in demand and which are not. This price mechanism is central to Smith's understanding of the economy, as it allows resources to be allocated in a way that reflects consumer preferences and maximizes utility. At the same time, Smith does not take for granted the efficiency of markets. He recognizes that markets can fail when monopolies or cartels form, distorting prices and limiting competition. The government, in Smith's view, has a role to play in ensuring that markets remain open and competitive, preventing the rise of monopolistic practices that would undermine the benefits of the division of labor and market competition. Smith's argument for limited government intervention is rooted in his belief that a free market, when left to its own devices, will naturally allocate resources in the most efficient way. However, he is quick to point out that the state must step in when monopolistic practices or other market failures hinder the smooth functioning of the economy. Smith's discussion of labor and production also touches on the importance of capital accumulation. In a market economy, capital, whether in the form of machinery, tools, or financial resources, plays a crucial role in increasing productivity. As workers specialize and become more efficient, the need for capital to support and enhance their work becomes more pronounced. For example, the introduction of machinery in a factory allows workers to produce more goods with less effort, increasing the overall output of the factory. This capital, whether invested by entrepreneurs or saved by individuals, serves as the foundation for economic growth, enabling businesses to expand and employ more workers. Capital accumulation also has significant implications for the distribution of wealth. As businesses invest in capital and expand their operations, they generate profits, which are then distributed to the owners of capital and the workers who contribute to production. Smith recognizes that this distribution of wealth can be uneven, with owners of capital often reaping a larger share of the profits than workers. This disparity is one of the central concerns of Smith's work, as he wrestles with the consequences of wealth inequality in a capitalist society. While Smith advocates for the efficiency of markets, he is not blind to the social consequences of economic systems that prioritize capital accumulation over the well-being of workers. In his view, the accumulation of capital is essential to economic growth, but it must be balanced with the welfare of the working population. A society that allows the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few individuals may experience social unrest and economic instability. Smith's solution to this problem is not a radical redistribution of wealth, but rather a system in which individuals are incentivized to invest in productive enterprises, thereby creating opportunities for employment and wealth generation across society. By ensuring that the benefits of economic growth are broadly shared, Smith believes that societies can achieve a balance between capital accumulation and social harmony. In addition to capital accumulation, Smith discusses the role of entrepreneurship in driving economic progress. Entrepreneurs are the individuals who take risks, invest capital, and organize the labor needed to produce goods and services. They are the drivers of innovation, seeking new markets, new products, and new methods of production. Smith's recognition of entrepreneurship as a key component of economic growth highlights the dynamic and forward-looking nature of capitalist economies, where new ideas and opportunities constantly emerge. Ultimately, Smith's views on labor, production, and wealth generation are deeply intertwined with his broader economic philosophy. He sees the division of labor as the engine of economic progress, but he is also keenly aware of its social and psychological effects. His work serves as a foundation for understanding the complex relationships between workers, capital, entrepreneurs, and markets, providing invaluable insights into the forces that shape modern economies. As Adam Smith's analysis deepens, he shifts focus to the role of government and its influence on the economy, offering his perspective on how state involvement interacts with the free market. Central to his thinking is the idea that a government's primary function is not to control or micromanage the economy, but rather to provide an environment that fosters economic growth, ensuring the protection of property rights, maintaining public order, and defending the nation. In The Wealth of Nations, Smith lays out a framework for the limited role of the state, arguing that excessive government intervention disrupts the natural workings of the market, whereas appropriate governance provides the stability necessary for growth. One of Smith's most influential ideas regarding government intervention is the concept of the invisible hand. This metaphor captures the self-regulating nature of a free market, where individuals pursuing their self-interest unintentionally contribute to the public good. Smith argues that when individuals are left to their own devices, driven by the desire for profit, they will naturally allocate resources in the most efficient manner, driven by competition and market forces. The pursuit of individual profit leads to the provision of goods and services that others need, creating a balance where supply meets demand without requiring central control. In this idealized vision of the economy, the government's role is minimal, and the market is the primary mechanism for determining prices, wages, and production levels. While Smith advocates for limited government interference, he does recognize that certain areas of governance are essential for the smooth functioning of the market. He identifies 3 key functions that the state must fulfill: national defense, the administration of justice, and the provision of public infrastructure. The first of these, national defense, is seen as a core responsibility of the state. Smith argues that without the protection of a stable and secure environment, the economy would be undermined, as individuals and businesses would be less likely to invest and innovate if they feared for their safety or property. The administration of justice is also critical, as it ensures the protection of private property and the enforcement of contracts. In Smith's vision, laws should be designed to uphold property rights and maintain order in society. Without the rule of law, individuals would be less inclined to engage in economic activities, as their rights and assets would not be secure. For Smith, the judiciary is a key institution in creating trust and facilitating economic exchanges. Without legal systems that ensure fairness, the market cannot function efficiently, as disputes and fraud would undermine transactions. Smith emphasizes that public infrastructure plays a vital role in supporting economic activity. Roads, bridges, canals, and other forms of infrastructure facilitate the movement of goods and services, reducing transaction costs and opening up new markets. In the absence of such infrastructure, the economy would be severely constrained, as businesses would struggle to reach customers and raw materials would be more difficult to transport. While private enterprise can and should contribute to infrastructure development, Smith argues that some investments in public works are best left to the state. For instance, a government-funded road network can enhance trade and mobility, benefiting not only private business, but the entire economy. These public goods are not easily provided by individual actors, making them an area where state involvement is necessary. Despite his advocacy for limited government, Smith is not entirely naive about the potential negative effects of economic concentration and corporate power. One of the recurring concerns in the wealth of nations is the potential for monopolies and corporate cartels to disrupt free competition. He warns that businesses or individuals with excessive market power may attempt to manipulate prices or restrict supply to increase their profits, which ultimately harms consumers and slows economic progress. In these cases, Smith contends that government intervention is necessary to ensure that competition remains fair and that market forces are not distorted by the selfish interests of a few powerful actors. This intervention would typically involve enforcing antitrust laws and curbing monopolistic practices to preserve a competitive and open marketplace. In addition to monopolies, Smith also addresses the issue of colonialism, particularly the economic relationship between European nations and their colonies. He criticizes the mercantilist system that dominated much of Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries, where governments sought to maximize national wealth through the accumulation of precious metals and the establishment of colonies. Smith argues that mercantilism was detrimental to the economy, as it distorted trade by imposing tariffs and trade restrictions, ultimately limiting the free flow of goods and resources. He believed that colonialism primarily benefited the colonial powers and their elites, rather than fostering sustainable growth for the colonies themselves. Smith's argument against mercantilism is rooted in his broader philosophy of free trade. He believes that nations should engage in commerce freely, without the barriers erected by government policies designed to protect domestic industries. Free trade, according to Smith, benefits all parties involved, as it allows countries to specialize in the production of goods they are most efficient at making, leading to lower prices and better goods for consumers. He envisions a global economy where goods, labor, and capital flow freely across borders, fostering competition and innovation. His support for free trade is a radical departure from the protectionist policies of the time, and it remains a cornerstone of modern economic thought. The state's role in economic matters, according to Smith, should also extend to ensuring that workers are paid fairly and that they benefit from the growth of the economy. While Smith is not advocating for state-mandated wages, he acknowledges the importance of fair compensation for labor. He argues that wages are largely determined by the labor market, with competition between workers and employers driving the price of labor. However, Smith recognizes that workers may not always have the bargaining power to secure fair wages, particularly when they are unskilled or when employers hold a disproportionate amount of market power. In these cases, he advocates for policies that ensure a basic standard of living for workers, preventing exploitation and reducing income inequality. Furthermore, Smith's views on taxation also reflect his commitment to a balanced relationship between government and the economy. He is a proponent of taxation that is equitable and transparent, arguing that taxes should be proportional to income or wealth and should be used to fund essential public services. Taxes, in Smith's view, should not be oppressive or excessive, but should be levied in a way that promotes fairness and supports public infrastructure. He suggests that the government should avoid creating excessive taxes or burdens that could stifle economic activity and reduce the incentives for entrepreneurs to invest and innovate. Ultimately, Adam Smith's thoughts on government reflect his belief in the power of the market to generate wealth, but also his understanding of the need for regulation to ensure fairness, competition, and public welfare. His advocacy for limited government intervention, while still recognizing the essential functions of the state, forms the backbone of modern economic theory. Smith's work has had a lasting impact on economic thought, influencing not only the development of classical economics, but also shaping the policies of governments around the world. His ideas continue to resonate, providing a framework for understanding the relationship between the state, the market, and the individual in a complex and dynamic global economy. As Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations progresses, he increasingly focuses on the intricacies of labor, capital, and the mechanisms that drive economic growth. One of the fundamental concepts that Smith introduces is the division of labor, a concept that remains a cornerstone of economic theory today. The division of labor refers to the practice of breaking down the production process into smaller, specialized tasks, with each worker focusing on a specific aspect of production. Smith argues that this specialization leads to greater efficiency and higher output. When workers focus on a single task, they become more skilled, and time is saved by eliminating the need to switch between different types of tasks. This, in turn, allows for the production of more goods at lower costs. In the opening sections of this discussion, Smith uses the example of a pin factory to illustrate the benefits of the division of labor. He describes how, in a typical factory, several workers are assigned different tasks. One draws out the wire, another straightens it, another cuts it, and so on. By dividing the process into these discrete steps, the factory produces far more pins than if each worker had to make a pin from start to finish. This specialization not only increases the efficiency of the factory, but also enhances the overall productivity of the economy. Smith's analysis of the division of labor extends beyond individual factories and into broader economic systems. He argues that the more specialized an economy becomes, the more complex and integrated the production process is. This allows economies to grow and expand, as specialization increases the range and quality of goods available. For example, a highly specialized workforce can produce goods that require advanced skills, such as machinery, textiles, or electronics, which would not be possible without such specialization. The division of labor thus enables nations to move beyond basic agricultural production and into the realm of manufacturing, where wealth and economic growth are most concentrated. However, Smith also acknowledges that there are limits to the division of labor. As workers become more specialized, they may lose sight of the broader economic processes and their connection to the larger world. Smith is concerned that excessive specialization could result in workers becoming overly reliant on a single industry or skill, which may leave them vulnerable to changes in demand or technological advances that make their skills obsolete. He notes that a balance must be struck between specialization and the broader flexibility of the labor force. Alongside the division of labor, Smith also delves deeply into the nature and role of capital in the economy. Capital, for Smith, is the stock of resources, tools, and investments that are used in the production of goods. He distinguishes between two types of capital: fixed capital and circulating capital. Fixed capital refers to investments in physical assets, such as buildings, machines, and land, while circulating capital consists of money, goods, and raw materials that move through the economy and are used to produce goods and services. Smith emphasizes that capital is essential for the growth of a nation's economy because it increases the productive capacity of the workforce. When workers have access to more capital, whether in the form of machinery, tools, or infrastructure, they can produce more goods more efficiently. For Smith, the accumulation of capital is closely tied to the savings and investments of individuals. He argues that savings, money that is not immediately spent, but instead invested in productive enterprises, are essential to the growth of the economy. Without savings, there would be no funds to invest in infrastructure, machinery, or new ventures, and the economy would stagnate. This is why Smith places such importance on the creation of wealth and the need for individuals and businesses to accumulate capital. However, Smith also understands that capital must be used wisely. He warns that the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few individuals or groups can lead to economic instability. In a healthy economy, capital should be spread throughout the population, invested in productive industries, and used to foster growth and innovation. Capital, in this sense, should work to benefit the broader society, not just the few at the top. Smith is wary of situations where capital is hoarded or used in ways that do not contribute to the productive capacity of the economy. He believes that when capital is used productively, it creates a cycle of wealth creation that benefits everyone, including workers, entrepreneurs, and consumers. In Smith's view, the accumulation of capital leads to the development of markets. Markets are the mechanisms through which goods and services are exchanged, and they rely on the existence of capital to function efficiently. Smith emphasizes that markets are inherently self-regulating, with supply and demand determining prices and quantities. However, he is keenly aware that the market system must be accompanied by certain rules and institutions to function smoothly. These include property rights, contracts, and legal protections that ensure a fair and functioning marketplace. Smith's discussion of markets is also intertwined with his broader argument in favor of free trade. He believes that markets should be open to competition, both domestically and internationally, without the barriers imposed by tariffs, subsidies, or other forms of protectionism. Free trade, according to Smith, encourages the flow of goods, capital, and labor across borders, increasing competition and driving innovation. By allowing countries to specialize in the production of goods in which they have a comparative advantage, Smith believes that free trade benefits all nations, regardless of their size or wealth. This is one of Smith's most enduring contributions to economic thought, and it has had a profound impact on global economic policy, particularly in the promotion of free market capitalism and the reduction of trade barriers. Beyond markets and trade, Smith also explores the nature of wages, profits, and rents. Wages, in Smith's view, are determined by the supply and demand for labor. When the demand for labor is high, wages rise, and when the supply of labor exceeds demand, wages fall. However, Smith notes that wages are not solely determined by these factors. They are also influenced by the cost of living, the availability of work, and the level of skill required for a particular job. He observes that in some industries, workers may be paid more because their work requires specialized skills, while in others, wages may be lower because the labor is less skilled or less in demand. Profits, on the other hand, are determined by the return on investment made by entrepreneurs and capitalists. In a competitive market, profits tend to be driven down by competition, as new entrants into the market increase supply and reduce prices. However, Smith acknowledges that profits can be influenced by factors such as monopolies, government policies, or market distortions. Rents, which are the returns to landowners, are influenced by the scarcity of land and the demand for land in a given area. Smith's exploration of wages, profits, and rents reflects his broader vision of a dynamic economy in which labor, capital, and land interact to create wealth. He recognizes that these factors are not static, and their interaction shapes the broader economic landscape. His understanding of these dynamics is crucial for his broader argument that economic growth is driven by the efficient allocation of resources, the specialization of labor, and the accumulation of capital. In the end, Smith's work lays the foundation for modern economic theory, offering timeless insights into the workings of economies and the relationships between individuals, businesses, and governments. His advocacy for free markets, limited government intervention, and the importance of capital accumulation has influenced generations of economists and policymakers, shaping the way we think about wealth, production, and the role of the state in economic affairs. In the final sections of The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith synthesizes his arguments into a comprehensive theory of economic systems, emphasizing the interconnectedness of individual actions, markets, and national prosperity. At the heart of his work is a deep understanding of how human nature drives economic activity. Smith posits that individuals, driven by self-interest, unintentionally contribute to the public good when they engage in market transactions. This principle, famously known as the invisible hand, suggests that in a competitive marketplace, individuals pursuing their own economic gain often lead to outcomes that are beneficial to society as a whole. The concept of the invisible hand is one of the most significant contributions Smith made to economic thought. He argues that when individuals and firms act in their self-interest, such as by pursuing profits, they help allocate resources efficiently, produce goods that consumers want, and create wealth in the process. This mechanism, according to Smith, operates best in an environment of competition, where no single entity has control over the market. The pursuit of personal benefit, combined with the competition among suppliers and demand from consumers, drives the economy forward, leading to increased productivity, lower costs, and innovation. While Smith emphasizes the importance of self-interest in economic activity, he does not advocate for an entirely laissez-faire system. He acknowledges that there are situations where the market may fail to achieve optimal outcomes, particularly in cases of monopolies or externalities, such as pollution. In such instances, Smith concedes that government intervention may be necessary to restore competition or protect public welfare. However, he argues that such intervention should be limited and only applied when absolutely necessary. He advocates for a government that protects property rights, enforces contracts, and provides public goods that the market cannot efficiently supply, such as infrastructure, defense, and education. Smith also examines the role of government in ensuring the proper functioning of the economy. While he stresses that government intervention should be minimal, he recognizes that some functions are beyond the capacity of individuals or businesses to perform effectively on their own. For instance, Smith argues that it is the responsibility of the state to maintain national defense, build infrastructure such as roads and bridges, and ensure the fairness of legal systems. These functions, he believes, are essential to creating a stable environment for commerce and ensuring that markets operate efficiently. One of the key areas where Smith calls for limited government intervention is in the realm of trade. His advocacy for free trade is perhaps one of his most revolutionary ideas. Smith rejects the mercantilist view, which held that a nation's wealth was determined by the accumulation of gold and silver through trade surpluses. Instead, Smith introduces the idea of absolute advantage, where nations should specialize in producing goods in which they have an inherent capability and trade those goods with other nations. By focusing on their strengths, countries can increase efficiency, lower costs, and benefit from the goods produced by others. This concept laid the groundwork for modern free trade theory, which has shaped global trade policies for centuries. Smith also discusses the distribution of wealth within society, addressing the relationships between workers, capitalists, and landowners. He observes that labor is the primary source of wealth, as it is the labor of individuals that produces the goods and services that contribute to economic growth. However, Smith notes that the distribution of wealth is not always equitable. Landowners, for example, often accumulate wealth through rent, which is largely unearned. Capitalists, on the other hand, profit from the returns on their investments in production. Workers, in contrast, earn wages for their labor, which tend to fluctuate depending on market conditions. Smith's analysis of wealth distribution is nuanced. While he recognizes that inequality may arise in a market economy, he also suggests that competition and the growth of markets will naturally reduce disparities over time. As economies expand, new opportunities for employment and entrepreneurship emerge, leading to greater mobility and the potential for individuals to improve their economic position. Smith is optimistic that as long as competition is allowed to flourish, economic inequality will not be as detrimental to society as critics might suggest, as long as individuals are free to pursue their own self-interest. Beyond the immediate mechanics of economic systems, Smith's work has profound implications for the broader concept of human progress. He believes that the accumulation of wealth through the mechanisms of trade, specialization, and capital investment leads to the advancement of society. As individuals and nations become wealthier, they are able to invest in education, culture, and scientific advancements, which further drives progress. Smith's vision is one in which economic growth fuels social progress, where the wealth generated by commerce is used to improve the lives of individuals and enhance the collective well-being of society. Yet, Smith is not naive about the challenges that lie ahead. He acknowledges that the path to economic prosperity is fraught with obstacles, such as political corruption, monopolies, and the potential for the abuse of power. While he is optimistic about the potential for markets to drive progress, he is also acutely aware of the need for vigilant oversight to ensure that economic systems function in a fair and just manner. Smith's approach to economic policy is grounded in a realistic understanding of human nature and the complexities of economic systems, and he warns against the excesses of both government and business. In the closing chapters of The Wealth of Nations, Smith shifts his focus back to the role of the state, urging governments to act in the best interest of society by promoting policies that enhance national wealth and support the productive capabilities of the economy. He emphasizes that the government must take steps to remove barriers to trade, ensure the efficient functioning of markets, and provide public goods that promote general welfare. Smith's vision of government is not one of a hands-off approach, but one where the state acts as a facilitator of economic activity, ensuring that markets operate fairly and equitably. Ultimately, Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations is not simply a work of economic theory. It is a blueprint for understanding the forces that shape society. Through the lens of markets, trade, labor, and capital, Smith provides a framework for analyzing the complexities of economic life, one that has profoundly influenced both academic and practical approaches to economics for over 2 centuries. His work has shaped the development of modern capitalism and has influenced policy decisions on a global scale. As much as The Wealth of Nations is a treatise on economics, it is also a work that offers timeless insights into the nature of human endeavor, the pursuit of self-interest, and the potential for progress in the context of a free and competitive society. Smith's ideas continue to resonate, offering invaluable lessons for understanding the dynamics of wealth, power, and progress in the modern world. In conclusion, Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations offers a foundational understanding of the mechanisms that drive economic activity and the structures that allow societies to flourish. It is a monumental work that not only shaped the field of economics, but also provided a philosophical framework for the development of modern capitalism. Through the lens of individual self-interest, competition, and the invisible hand, Smith presents a vision of an economy where personal ambitions can, through the right conditions, lead to the collective benefit of society. Smith's emphasis on free markets, limited government intervention, and the role of competition in fostering innovation and wealth creation became the cornerstone of economic thought for centuries. His ideas on the division of labor, specialization, and the importance of trade have had a profound impact on the way economies are structured and have laid the groundwork for contemporary capitalist systems around the world. His work also highlighted the interdependence of nations through trade, challenging the protectionist policies of his time and advocating for a system where nations focus on their strengths, benefiting from mutual exchanges. However, Smith's vision was not one of unchecked laissez-faire capitalism. He recognized the need for regulation, particularly in cases where monopolies, externalities, or inequality threatened the fair functioning of markets. His calls for a minimal but effective role for government, such as ensuring property rights, providing public goods, and safeguarding competition, reflect a pragmatic approach to governance that balances the benefits of a free market with the protection of the public interest. One of the most enduring contributions of the wealth of nations is the concept of the invisible hand, a powerful metaphor for how individual actions driven by self-interest can lead to outcomes that benefit society as a whole. This idea, while not without its critiques, remains a cornerstone of classical economic theory and continues to influence discussions on economic policy and market dynamics today. At the same time, Smith's work serves as a reminder that the economy is not a machine that operates in isolation. Human values, cultural practices, and the political environment all shape the way economic systems function. Smith's insights into wealth distribution, the role of labor, and the nature of economic inequality offer important lessons for addressing the challenges faced by modern economies. His work remains relevant not only as an economic text, but also as a guide to understanding the complex relationship between individuals, markets, and society. In many ways, The Wealth of Nations is a call to action for policymakers, economists, and citizens alike to consider the broader impact of economic systems and the role that self-interest, cooperation, and governance play in shaping the world we live in. While much has changed since Smith's time, his work continues to resonate as a foundational text for understanding the dynamics of wealth creation, market competition, and the role of government in shaping economic and social outcomes. As we confront the challenges of the 21st century, Smith's exploration of human nature, market forces, and government intervention offers timeless insights into how we might navigate the complexities of modern economic life. Ultimately, The Wealth of Nations remains a work that transcends its historical context, providing a deep and lasting influence on the way we think about economics, society, and human potential. It serves as both a reminder of the possibilities that can arise from a well-functioning economic system and a cautionary tale about the dangers of ignoring the broader social and ethical implications of economic practices. As relevant today as it was when it was first published, Smith's masterpiece continues to offer invaluable lessons for anyone seeking to understand the forces that shape our economic world.